Any victim that wants to speak with the department has done so, hopefully. Well, thanks to the incredibly brave people sitting here behind you, we can actually ask them if that's true. Now, would the survivors and victims who are here please stand up one more time? Just by show of hands, how many of you or your loved ones actually have met with the Department of Justice and provided testimony and evidence? None. And of those of you who have not met, which is everyone, how many of you have reached out either individually or through a lawyer or representative to offer to provide testimony and evidence? All of them. And of those of you, all of you, who have reached out, how many of you were denied or ignored by the Department of Justice? All of them. And despite the shameful and despicable efforts by Ms. Bondi and her department to intimidate you, how many of you are still willing to speak to the Department of Justice? All of them. Well, Ms. Bondi, it looks like you have some more witnesses to talk to.
Gentleman's time has expired.
And I yield back.
We will go.
Seven minutes ago, Congressman Dan Goldman stood up in the House Judiciary Committee, held up a single sheet of paper, and dropped a bomb Attorney General Pam Bondi could not explain. An email from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell discussing, in Epstein's own words, statements Donald Trump made about his relationship with Epstein. The email exists. It is in the DOJ files. But when Goldman held it up, massive sections were blacked out. Redacted, when Goldman asked Bondi to release the unredacted version, so the American people can understand the extent of Donald Trump's lies, Bondi didn't answer. She attacked Goldman. And what happened next? The shouting, Goldman literally yelling quiet at Bondi, exposed something far bigger than one email. Subscribe right now and hit the bell, because what I am showing you is not just redacted words. It is a pattern of protection and a congressman who refused to let it slide. I've covered congressional hearings for years. I've seen heated exchanges. I've seen witnesses deflect tough questions. But I've never seen a sitting attorney general respond to evidence of a cover-up by attacking the lawyer presenting it and then getting shouted down by that same lawyer when she wouldn't stop talking over him. That happened on the 11th of February, 2026. House Judiciary Committee oversight hearing, 5 hours into Bondi's testimony. Survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse sitting in the gallery wearing white shirts with redacted text on them. The truth is underscore, 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 underscore. Epstein survivors are still waiting, cameras at every angle. And Dan Goldman, former federal prosecutor, lead counsel in Trump's first impeachment, now congressman from New York, waiting with an email that Bondi's own department had released, but buried under redactions. He wasn't there to ask theoretical questions about transparency. He was there with evidence specific, documented, undeniable. And by the end of his questioning time, the hearing room had descended into shouting chaos, because Goldman had just proven something that no one in that room could deny. Let me take you back to December 2025. The DOJ released millions of Epstein file pages mandated by the Epstein Files Transparency Act. But survivors and lawmakers noticed a pattern. Victims' names were exposed while powerful men's names were redacted. Billionaires flagged as co-conspirators. Redacted communications discussing specific individuals. Redacted. Buried in those pages was an email from Epstein to Maxwell discussing Donald Trump. Goldman's staff found it during document review. When Goldman read the partially unredacted portions, he understood why the DOJ didn't want the full version public. It proved Trump lied about his relationship with Epstein. And proving that, with Epstein's own words, was something Bondi could not allow. Picture this, it is late afternoon in the Rayburn House office building. The hearing has been brutal. Democrats have pressed Bondi on redactions, on missing files, on survivors being ignored. Bondi has deflected every question, attacked every questioner, pivoted to stock market numbers and crime statistics. Thomas Massie caught her hiding Les Wexner's name as a co-conspirator. She called him a failed politician. Ted Lieu asked about Trump attending parties with Epstein and underage girls. She called it ridiculous. The pattern was clear. Any question about Trump and Epstein gets a personal attack, not an answer. And then Dan Goldman's turn came. He didn't open with a speech. He didn't grandstand. He did what prosecutors do. He presented evidence. Attorney General Bondi, Goldman began, holding up a document. I want to show you something from the files your department released. The room went quiet. not the polite quiet of routine questioning, the tense quiet of people recognizing that something real was about to happen. Goldman continued, his voice measured but firm. This is an email from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell. According to the portions of this email that your department did not redact, this email discusses statements that Donald Trump made about his prior relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. He paused. Let that sink in. An email from Epstein himself to his co-conspirator Maxwell discussing what Trump said publicly about their relationship. But as you can see, Goldman held the document higher, turning it toward the cameras. Large portions of this email are redacted. The American people cannot read what Jeffrey Epstein wrote about Donald Trump's statements. Another pause, deliberate prosecutorial. So my question to you is very simple. Will you commit to publicly providing the unredacted version of this email so that the American people can understand the extent of Donald Trump's lies about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? Stop right here. Feel the shape of that question. Now, can you explain the redactions? Not what is your policy on transparency, he asked. Will you release the evidence that proves Trump lied, yes or no? And if you've watched this far and you are starting to understand what just happened, like this video right now, the algorithm determines who sees this story. Like it, write what you were thinking in the comments. And let's keep going, because Bondi's response is when everything exploded. Bondi didn't answer the question, not even close. What she said was, you are about as good of a lawyer today as you were when you tried to impeach President Trump in 2019. Have you apologized for that? Personal attack, immediate reflexive. The move of someone who cannot answer the question and knows it. Goldman didn't take the bait. Attorney General, I asked you a yes or no question. Will you release the unredacted email? Bondi kept going. Congressman, you have spent years attacking this president with false accusations. Attorney General, Goldman tried to interrupt. Bondi talked over him. And now you want to talk about transparency when you sat silently while Merrick Garland. Attorney General, Goldman's voice rose. Will you answer the question? Bondi didn't stop. She kept talking, attacking Goldman's record, deflecting to the Biden administration, pivoting to unrelated cases. And that is when Goldman did something that shocked the entire room. He shouted one word loud enough that it cut through Bondi's deflection and stopped her mid-sentence. Quiet. The hearing room erupted, not applause, not boos, chaos. Members scrambling. Chairman Jim Jordan banging the gavel, shouting for order. Reporters typing frantically, survivors in the gallery standing, some with hands over their mouths. Because what just happened was unprecedented. A congressman, a former federal prosecutor who knows exactly how decorum works, had just shouted down the Attorney General of the United States in the middle of her deflection. And he did it because she refused to answer a direct question about evidence that Donald Trump lied about Jeffrey Epstein. Goldman wasn't finished. Once the room settled, barely, he repeated the question. Attorney General Bondi, yes or no? Will you release the unredacted version of the email from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell discussing Donald Trump's statements about their relationship? Bondi's face was tight. You could see the calculation. Answer the question honestly and admit she won't release it. That is a cover-up. Commit to releasing it. That exposes Trump. Attack Goldman again. She'd already tried that and gotten shouted down. She chose option 3 anyway. Congressman, there are legal standards that govern redactions in these files. And I am not going to sit here and be lectured by someone who Goldman cut her off. That is not a yes. That is a no. You will not release the email. The American people should understand the Attorney General just refused to release evidence that contradicts President Trump's public statements about Jeffrey Epstein. There are moments in congressional hearings that define entire investigations. Not because of what gets proven in that room. Nothing gets proven in congressional hearings. But because of what gets exposed about who is protecting whom and why. This was one of those moments. Dan Goldman had just done something remarkably simple and devastatingly effective. He showed evidence that the DOJ possessed information about Trump's lies regarding Epstein, and he got Bondi on the record refusing to make that information public. That is not speculation, that is documentation. The email exists, Epstein wrote it. It discusses Trump's statements, the DOJ redacted it. And when asked to release it, Bondi said no. Pattern established, evidence documented, cover-up confirmed. And Goldman made sure every camera in that room captured it. But here is what makes this moment even more significant. And this is the detail that most coverage is missing. Before Goldman asked about the email, he did something else. He asked the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse who were sitting in the gallery, survivors who had tried to contact the Justice Department, who had requested meetings, who had information to share about their abusers, to stand up and raise their hands if the DOJ refused to respond to them. Every single one of them stood. Every single one raised their hand. Bondi sat at the witness table facing forward, not looking at them. Goldman let the silence hang, let the cameras capture it, survivors standing, Bondi ignoring them. And then he transitioned to the email. Do you see the structure of what he just did? First, show that Bondi ignores survivors who have information about Epstein's network. Then show that Bondi hides information about Trump's lies regarding Epstein. The pattern isn't subtle. The DOJ under Bondi protects powerful men and ignores the people Epstein hurt. That is not a partisan talking point. That is what happened in that room, documented on camera, with Bondi sitting 10 feet away, unable to deny it. Goldman also pointed to another document during his questioning, an email that the DOJ had released containing a list of Epstein victims' names. The list was supposed to be redacted to protect the victims. But when the DOJ released it, only one name on the entire list was blacked out. The rest fully visible, exposed, published for the world to see. That is clearly intentional, Goldman said, to intimidate these survivors and victims. Think about what that means. An email with multiple victims' names. The DOJ is supposed to protect victim privacy. They redact one name, leave the others exposed. Either that is catastrophic incompetence, which raises questions about Bondi's ability to run the department, or it is intentional, which raises questions about whether the DOJ is using exposure as intimidation. Neither answer is acceptable. And when Goldman pressed Bondi on it, she denied intentionality but couldn't explain how such a specific error happened. One name redacted, all others exposed. That doesn't happen by accident when you are processing millions of documents through multiple review layers. That happens when someone makes a choice. Now, let me tell you what happens next, because this story is accelerating. The email Goldman referenced is now a matter of public record. It exists. We know it exists because Goldman held it up and Bondi didn't deny its existence. We know it discusses Trump's statements about Epstein because that is what the unredacted portions say. We know the DOJ is hiding the full contents because Goldman asked for it and Bondi refused. That means the next step is obvious: legal pressure to force the release subpoena, court order, congressional demand. The Epstein Files Transparency Act already requires full disclosure. If the DOJ is withholding material that contradicts presidential statements about a sex trafficking investigation, that is not a discretionary redaction. That is obstruction. And Goldman, who was a federal prosecutor before he was a congressman, knows exactly how to build that case. Subscribe to this channel right now and hit that bell icon, because I will be covering every development as this unfolds. The legal challenges, the survivor advocacy, the next hearing when Goldman gets another chance to press Bondi on what is being hidden. Here is what we know for certain. Jeffrey Epstein wrote an email to Ghislaine Maxwell. That email discusses statements Donald Trump made about his relationship with Epstein. The Justice Department has that email. They released a redacted version. When asked to release the full version, the Attorney General refused. That is not a theory. That is what happened on camera in a congressional hearing. And the only reason you redact evidence that contradicts someone's public statements is because releasing it would prove they lied. If the email supported Trump's version of events, if it showed Trump was telling the truth about barely knowing Epstein, about kicking him out of Mar-a-Lago, about ending their friendship years ago, Bondi would have released it in a heartbeat. The fact that she won't tells you everything you need to know about what Epstein actually wrote. The hearing continued for another hour after Goldman's questioning. Other members asked other questions, but the energy had shifted. Goldman had broken through the partisan theater and shown something real: evidence being hidden, survivors being ignored, and an attorney general who would rather shout over a congressman than answer a yes or no question about transparency. By the time the hearing ended, nearly 6 hours after it started, the clip of Goldman shouting "quiet" at Bondi was already going viral, not because of the spectacle, because of what it represented. A prosecutor forcing accountability, a congressman refusing to accept deflection, and an attorney general caught protecting the president instead of pursuing the truth. Share this video right now. Send it to someone who needs to see it, because what Goldman did today, documenting the cover-up in real time with evidence on the record, is exactly how you force transparency when the people in power don't want to give it. 7 minutes. That is all it took for Dan Goldman to ask one question, present one piece of evidence, and expose the entire strategy Bondi has been using to protect Trump from the Epstein files. Don't answer. Attack the questioner. Talk over them. Run out the clock. It worked on other members. It didn't work on Goldman, because Goldman is a prosecutor. He knows when someone is hiding evidence. He knows what it looks like when a witness can't answer a simple question. And he knows that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in a hearing is ask a question that has no good answer, and then force the person to sit in the silence when they refuse to respond. The email exists. Bondi won't release it. Survivors are being ignored. And Dan Goldman just made sure the entire country knows it. Subscribe, hit the bell, share this video, and watch the 2 videos on your screen right now. They'll give you everything you need to understand what is coming next.